Welcome to Lynn Cullen Live. Talk radio without the static. Email your questions and comments to lynncullenshow@gmail.com. And now your host, Lynn Cullen.
Yeah, the totally still positive Lynn Cullen here on December 8th. Happy to be here with you. We're going to do something today that we don't do enough, and that is pay attention to what's going on in the state capital of this Commonwealth, Harrisburg. I have often thought of Harrisburg as a gross pit where our tax dollars go to be wasted. But we have with us today a reporter who is fascinated by this pit and always has been. And hi, Stephen. How are you?
I'm good, Lynn. How are you? I like the new intro. It's very modern and hip.
Oh, see, I can't. When Stephen Caruso, ladies and gentlemen, investigative reporter for Spotlight PA, covering the pit in Harrisburg, was once the producer of this show. So we didn't have that then. No, I guess we wouldn't have. Anyway, yeah, we're hipper than we were when you were around, Stephen.
You always got to change and adopt and et cetera, et cetera.
Et cetera, et cetera. Right. So and I must say that, so I would do the show and Stephen and I were in the same room. That was when we actually had a studio, and we would sort of a studio, and we would sit there together. And of all the producers that have done this program, Stephen was the one who did not want to be on air. Anytime I tried to get him on to give me an opinion, he was, and the reason is because Stephen Caruso is truly one of those endangered species, a true journalist who believes that his opinions do not belong in the public sphere. And I was always tickled by your scrupulousness in that regard.
I appreciate it. I will say the last couple of years have perhaps changed that a little. Let's go if I feel more comfortable stating when I have researched lots of facts and I have talked to lots of people, that certain things that may sound like opinion might just be a fact.
Yeah, welcome to the new reality. Right, exactly right. When facts seem to be so fungible these days, right? Yeah. It's a tough time for a true journalist, but you guys have to rise to the challenge of being able to call out lies and call them lies, right?
Yes. Of course, I might not always say lie, but yeah, no, I mean, it is tricky, and I must say, you have picked a very fun topic to talk about, because Harrisburg is in the middle of something that is almost impossible to not talk about in both sides' terms. But
exactly. Exactly. And what we're talking about, ladies and gentlemen, is the most complicated mess of a story that I dare you to try to explain what the hell is going on with the leadership of the House of Representatives of the Commonwealth of Pennsylvania. Try to explain where things stand without having our heads spinning. It's impossible.
Sure.
I know.
I will try, Lynn.
Try. Make it simple. Try to make this simple, because we are in a place that we've never been before. I mean, we had an election, and yet nothing seems to be resolved. Nobody even knows who's in charge. Okay, go for it.
So yeah, let me just back up to say some of the basic things. We just had this election in Pennsylvania. Josh Shapiro is Democratic elect governor, replacing Tom Wolf. So that it's still a Democrat in the governor's mansion, and right. Republicans still control the state Senate as they have for many, many years. The House, going into this election, I don't even think Democrats thought it would flip. They thought it would get a lot closer, but they did not think it would flip because there were new maps, though. There were these new maps that made it a lot different, and Democrats thought gave them better odds. But I don't know anyone who thought the chamber would flip. Then come to election day, we start getting returns in, and Democrats are doing really well in these new districts. And then about a week later, after a bunch of haggling and counting close races and concessions and some found ballots and all this, Democrats come out winning 102 seats to Republicans winning 101 seats in a 203-member body. Seemingly, Democrats have a majority because they have won 102 seats. No one disputes that. But there is a rub. There is already, and the best part is all these seats are going to be in Pittsburgh. So all this is Allegheny County. One member from Penn Hills, Representative Tony DeLuca, died in October, too late to take his name off the ballot. So one of those, and so that's a 1-vote margin. Democrats have a
okay. Wait a minute. Wait, Stephen.
Yes?
And I just want to make clear: Tony DeLuca died. He was dead when the election took place, but he was re-elected.
He was. He was re-elected.
So he was a dead man was re-elected. Okay, obviously he cannot take his seat.
Exactly.
Okay, so that's one of the seats that's not really fillable.
Yeah. So already, let's not even get into the other two. Let's start with just that. Already, if you just go with the fact that there is a dead man who was reelected. When all respect to Tony DeLuca, he's the longest serving member at the time. Also he always wore very fun, bright suits. He was a very entertaining man to talk to, from my perspective as well. But now it's 101, 101. So you can make some argument that there's not a majority because you can reach into case law and find examples. Basically, one example. And in fact, Republicans just sent one of these over, which is saying that if you're really bean counting who is a member of the legislature for purposes of a majority, you have to, it has to be people who can actually show up to Harrisburg and cast a vote. And Tony DeLuca can't do that. No one disputes that. But if I were to break it down to the simplest, and we're not going to get into the complicated stuff, the simplest way to look at it is what constitutes a majority. Is the most important thing that Democrats did win 102 seats? If so, then you're going to say, well, yeah, Democrats should be the majority. But if you're like, yeah, but wait a minute, one of them is dead. They can't come to Harrisburg to really, they can't show up. They can't vote. They can't do anything. Then it would be 101. No one has majority. So that's the simplest way to say what's kind of happening. And then we can get more complicated. Do you want me to get more complicated, Lynn?
Yeah, because we've got two other seats also from here, Summer Lee and Austin Davis, right? Who have resigned their seats because they won bigger, better jobs. Summer Lee going to Washington and Austin Davis becoming the lieutenant governor. So those two, even though they won those seats, will not be taking them. So now we got 2 plus the dead guy.
Now, Lynn, I'm going to offer one opinion. You say bigger and better things. What's bigger and better than Pennsylvania General Assembly? I mean,
what's bigger? Better I can come up with, but bigger I can't.
But anyway, so that is this extra rub on this, so that already the House was in practical terms at 101, 101, and then but then Austin Davis, Summer Lee won higher offices. They cannot sit in both. There was some chatter before the election, directly after the election, of would they try to hold on for a little bit to be present for the speakership election on January 3rd. So I guess to back up, when all this was supposed to come to a head, seemingly was January 3rd, which is the first day of session according to the Constitution. It's the first Tuesday of the new year, and that's January 3rd this year. when the House will gather and they'll elect a speaker. And the speaker is really important because it's just like with, like Nancy Pelosi's powerful, but, so like the speaker in the Pennsylvania House, they name committee chairs. Committee chairs are very powerful. They have the ability to basically say what bills die and what bills get a vote. They call it bills for votes. They moderate the debate. It's a powerful position. Controlling the speakership basically means it is not, in conjunction with some other things, though, like helps the party control the agenda. And obviously Democrats with a majority would want to control the agenda, but you need a majority of votes to be the speaker. And
they won't have those.
Tony DeLuca.
Yeah.
And so there was some thought that Davis and Lee, especially Summer Lee, because like she actually be sworn into Congress on the same day, and there's some chatter about could she vote in Harrisburg and sprint down to D.C. and do it all in one day and vote for two speakers in one day. And then I'm kind of happy that didn't happen because it would have driven me nuts. What happened? Like there was this lead up of like what's going to happen there, but what happened this week, yesterday in fact, is Joanna McClinton, who is the Democratic leader. She is.
This is a representative, a black woman from Philadelphia, and if she does become the speaker, which eventually I suspect will happen, she will be the first black woman to hold that position.
First woman, first black woman, second black person. Kay Leroy Irvis from the 70s. Anyway, but yes. So she is Joanna McClinton's historic. I just say that because sometimes I see people say first black person. Not true. But anyway, Joanna would be, or Representative McClinton would be the Democratic leader. She would become speaker if she could get the votes. But what she did this week is have herself sworn in. A judge came up from Delaware County, swore her in as a state rep, as she is claiming to be majority leader because Democrats won 102 seats. She then, following some old precedent from the mid-2000s, claims she has the ability to call 3 special elections to fill all 3 of those empty seats. Tony DeLuca's, Summer Lee's, Austin Davis's. Because Lee and Davis, what I should have said is Lee and Davis also announced their resignations yesterday. They didn't try to hang around. All 3 of those seats are now vacant. And McClinton claimed the authority off of this precedent to schedule 3 special elections for February 7th of next year, which is basically about as soon as you could possibly hold them under state law. You have to have at least 60 days from the vacancy to the election. And she spoke to the press, and her point was just with her fellow Democratic leaders was just that, like, look, the people spoke. They elected 102 Democrats. We don't have that right now, but we think that what we need to do is just move forward, develop a plan, and fill these seats as quickly as possible so that those people's the people of those districts have a voice in Harrisburg as soon as possible, and Harrisburg and the House can just move forward with an agenda.
But how can she declare herself the Speaker of a House that is not even in session and is not constituted until next year, January 3?
A great question, because there is this very weird situation that happened in 2004 where a lawmaker resigned in December. And December of a even year like this, like 2022 or 2004, is usually a nothing month. Normally nothing is supposed to happen in the legislature right now. They will mercifully all go home for the holidays and have Christmas. They'll drop a few bill memos. Retiring members will leave their offices, and there'll be some quiet conversations where all the leaders just talk about what we can do better next year. But there is this one precedent where some Republican lawmaker in the Poconos stepped down after he won re-election on like early December 2004 and said, I'm getting a new job, so I'm resigning. And then basically, like, you read through the code, there's supposed to be a presiding officer, which is sort of like the speaker, but not the speaker, that like exists and can call a vacancy. Because like nobody doubts that the power to fill a vacancy falls to the House. And in that case, the Republican leader, not the speaker, because there is no speaker in December. The speaker is chosen on January 3rd, as I think I mentioned. So like we don't have a speaker, but the majority leader said, all right, I'm going to have myself sworn in. and then become the presiding officer as the highest ranking member because I'm the majority leader. That election is technically done internally right after the election. And then I'm going to claim that. So I am presiding officer and I will schedule an election. And there was a legal fight over this. And at the time, the Democratic administration tried to deny the Republican General Assembly the ability to call this election. And the Supreme Court at the time said, no, they can call this election. But the one thing I also have to add,
of course.
The other thing I have to add, though, no, it's okay. It's complicated because that same thing, that just makes it seem like, okay, that makes sense. But like also that case, Republicans had a majority before that election and they had a majority after that election. And this one seat that they had to call a special in did not impact that. There were still more than 102 Republicans.
Yes. Okay.
So like, in some ways, what McClinton's doing, there's precedent for the majority leader claiming to be a majority leader and then calling a special. What makes it complicated is the fact that can she claim to be a majority leader with Tony DeLuca not alive and in any ability to take office? Does that make sense?
And also the assumption being, and I mean it's a reasonable assumption, that all three of these seats will be filled by Democrats.
Yes. It is I think it is it is a fairish assumption. I mean, I always want to qualify things because also, I think, it's a February special election, an off year. Who the hell knows? There's some big money groups out there for Republicans that I think have expressed interest in just, kicking around if they could do something. I think also that, control of the General Assembly is on the line. So that also makes it complicated. And that means, people are probably more willing to take a long shot. It's not like it's just a seat. To me, that's the difference between 106 and 107. This is the majority.
That's it.
But they're all very safe. They're all very
So
safe.
guys, if you're in any of these districts, man, sorry, you got to turn out for this strange February special election.
Yeah. They're going to be,
it's important.
Very important, extremely important.
Yeah.
Well,
I do want to say that go ahead, but I mean, you did that really well because I know there's other little things here and there that we could, complicate it. But so how will this play out? Do you think? Will it end up in the Republicans appealing to some legal, to go to the courts? What's going to happen?
Yeah, I mean, I had a top GOP source tell me the other day that they're expecting litigation on this because, and that's fake. Everything I described, from the Republican perspective, what's happening here is that, the Democrats are just sort of taking initiative and doing things and then just without precedent because, what kind of happened in here is that on the last day of the last session, so November 30th is when technically is the last day of the old session. The old Republican speaker, Brian Cutler, called a special election to fill DeLuca's seat. And in doing that too, it was and he called it for the same date, February 7th. So your listeners might be thinking, well, what's the big deal here? Everyone agrees on the date. Because in doing that, he's saying there is a vacancy. And in doing that, he's depriving Democrats of the ability to claim any sort of majority in this weird interim and then call those specials to then fill those extra seats. So it just creates more uncertainty. So does that make sense?
Yeah.
Or is that
it makes sense.
It way more complicated?
And it's, my mother would say it's clear as mud. Yeah. It is.
And,
but okay.
I would say
go ahead.
Statement. Yeah, no, and in a statement yesterday, Brian Cutler, or maybe it was Brian Cutler or the spokesperson. I don't want to put words in anyone's mouth, but Republicans said this was a paperwork insurrection. That they're.
Yeah. Right. Sure. Yeah.
Yeah. And look, I think that this is unprecedented legal grounds. I think the fact that we've seen bits and pieces of precedent that tell us what to do here, but we haven't seen all of that combined with the stakes being so high and the margin being so close. And that's why everyone's at each other's throats. And then add in the fact that there is no love lost in the House. This is a chamber that was fighting with each other not just over like big weighty issues of abortion and the 2020 election. Like, this is a chamber fighting with each other over, hey, you're not wearing a mask and it's in the middle of COVID, and my kid is sick all the time, or I'm recovering from cancer, and you're, showing up like and making a joke about this. So there is no love lost in that chamber, I think, between members. Like, and that's something that many retiring members kind of in floor speeches were complaining about.
Sure. Yeah. Well, that's why I call it a pit too. But hey, in the pit, in that pit, one of the people who's coming back, who's probably hated and loathed by his own people and the Democrats, is Mr. Mastriano, right?
Yes, he is coming back.
Can you imagine how lonely he's going to be? I mean, really? I mean, what's his situation there now?
So we shall see. I believe in his concession, he said, look for more things in terms of, maybe like just like that. He doesn't want the movement to end. I think that like his movement that he's created, like his grassroots
the Christian nationalist neo-fascist movement.
His movement of people who saw his Facebook Live videos in the middle of the pandemic, early in the pandemic, and said, "This is my guy. This is the person who speaks to me."
Yeah. Okay. That's right. Nationalist fascist.
Look, I would be at the Capitol and see people at protests for all sorts of conservative issues wearing Mastriano's army T-shirts. Like, there's not many state lawmakers who have supporters walking around wearing like even Summer Lee. She has lots of support. I didn't see people wearing Lee's army T-shirts.
Because they're not nuts, and the people that are following him are stark, raving, tinfoil hat wearing lunatics.
Well,
this is something where Stephen can't respond to that because he's a journalist. But
what I will say, Lynn, is that regardless of who they are, they like him a lot. And if Mastriano wants to talk to them and harness them to try and influence lawmakers during a big vote, like say in budget season, that would be interesting.
Like having them show up in camo and armed to the teeth. That's the kind of way that they will try to influence what's going on.
There's no signs of that. No, look, this is I par for the course. I knew what I was signing up for. No, look, I think that we're also seeing in the House. They specifically said not recruiting senators, but in the House, we saw the House Freedom Caucus start, a state-level Freedom Caucus of some of the more conservative members, including some who I think, some who I would put ideologically with Mastriano. So
right.
I think that the right in Harrisburg is sort of aware that they need to be more vocal. And I'm sure for some of your listeners, you're like, what do you mean? They're super vocal. But like the thing I would say is that what we saw in the House, from my perspective as someone who's covered the place, is especially House Republicans are always trying to find a way to find the middle ground between their last remaining Southeastern lawmakers who gave them majority and their really conservative rural lawmakers close to the grassroots. And this is what powered a lot of debates. Like, there was the fight over PIC funding last year. There was fights over Act 77. There were fights over election audits. And there was always this push-pull of, I'm sure, the headlines get attention, but I often felt like watching whatever action the House Republicans were doing, and sometimes the Senate Republicans too. I was like, you could go further than this. When I say further, if they wanted to be even more outrageous, or they wanted to flex their muscles even more, if they wanted to take a stand, they could do more. But they didn't, because they knew they had to pick a point where they could go as far as they could that would make their grassroots folks happy, while also trying to give as much of a fig leaf as possible to their moderates. In the House, that dance is over. They're in the minority. I mean, they will be most likely after these election results, just qualified as much as they have to. And so I think there's a lot of people who are just like, like, we don't have to worry about the Southeast anymore. It's time to do it our way. It's time to start a Freedom Caucus. It's time to like stand up as much as we can for conservative principles. Does that make sense?
Okay, so you're suggesting that the Republicans in the minority now will turn right.
They could. I know lots of people don't want them to. Like, I know there are a lot of a lot of Republicans who don't want that, but there are definitely some who think, like, we'll actually have a story on this. I'm coming out with my colleague soon. Like, that is the vibe. There's some people like, the issue here is that we got away from talking about kitchen table issues. We could be more moderate policy focused, and others who are like, yeah, no, you're right, we're not policy focused, but we should have been passing bans on vaccine mandates, and we should have been passing more school choice. And, you know, we should have been passing our most conservative policy agenda, aggressive conservative policy.
Okay. Hey, I know you don't have a lot more time. I want to just get one more bit of information out of you. And that is that this House, the Republican constituted House that no longer quite exists, one of its acts this year was to impeach the district attorney in Philadelphia, Larry Krasner, who was reelected by the people of Philadelphia by an overwhelming margin. And I want to know how, in the name of God, they think that they can overturn the will of the people when they have no indication that he has committed any impeachable offense.
Well, they have, I think, about 6 articles of impeachment that have what they are laying out as their claim for why they did this. I believe among them are just some claims that Krasner did not properly handle a trial of policemen. I believe there's some claims about some other wonky legal things.
Steve,
I'll be honest.
Steven,
I did not. Lynn, I actually have specifically not covered that closely.
Okay.
Like, I've paid attention.
It's just BS, and it was a stunt. It's a stunt. It was a election year stunt, and it's outrageous, and goes in cahoots with Republicans always trying to flout the will of the people. The people vote, and Republicans refuse to accept it. Excuse me. That's me being
no. It's all good. Can I actually? I was asked this question at a forum, and I the most diplomatic answer I can give is I'd like to point out something else that's happening in Harrisburg. There's actually a second impeachment going on right now. Have you heard of it?
No, I don't think so.
Yeah, the House is working very slowly, very diligently through an impeachment of a Schuylkill County commissioner for, I believe, was alleged harassment of staff, female staff. I believe sexual harassment, alleged. But I remember even talking to a Schuylkill County lawmaker who was just like, "Yeah, we don't like this guy. Like, he should be gone. He's lost all political support, but he just refuses to resign." And you know, the challenge, like, nobody is disputing that the legality of sexually harassing your staff, that's illegal, or at least unethical or unlawful or unbecoming of a state or elected official. And so the House has actually, for the last couple months, been very quietly, very diligently moving through a process to impeach said lawmaker. And at the end of the term, when they're like around when the House was like, we're going to push Krasner through, they actually very specifically, it went into a subcommittee, not a special subcommittee, but just like a judiciary committee subcommittee. And they actually took the time to say, you know what, we need to do more research. We need to request more documents. We're not going to send a resolution through holding this commissioner in contempt, but we just have to do more research. And they have requested more documents, and it's still just sitting there. But from my understanding is, like, you know, they're going through a very slow, diligent process of finding the truth of the matter of what this commissioner has been up to. And that has been the second impeachment that no one's really talking about in Harrisburg. And I will allow your listeners to take your judgment of Krasner however they want.
Yeah. What is the party affiliation of this commissioner?
He's a Republican, if I'm not mistaken.
Oh, okay. He's a Republican. All right. My God. So you think the Shapiro governorship is going to be a more activist kind of governorship than Governor Wolf?
Ooh, how do you mean activist?
I just think more out there. I mean, just by virtue of their personalities and the way they do their politics.
I could see that. I know people in the legislature are excited because Shapiro was in the legislature, and Wolf sometimes was not the best negotiator, or maybe not the best negotiator, but there were a lot of lawmakers in both parties who felt like Wolf wouldn't take them that seriously, wouldn't communicate his goals, wouldn't communicate the status of things to them. And Shapiro he's a consensus builder, I think, among all else. I mean, just look at his transition. Mm-hmm. He's naming people from all over the place to the chagrin of many who are like criminal justice advocates who see like the president of the Philadelphia Police Union named on his team. So, I think that Shapiro, it will be interesting to watch because I think that is a guy who likes to cut a deal. Yeah, it will be interesting. Well, yeah, so here, I'm glad for you that things are looking very interesting. And I want to thank you for joining us today, Stephen, and thank you for your great work. And I want to tell people that if you want to know what's going on in Harrisburg, it would be a good idea to keep an eye on Spotlight PA, which is the journalistic organ that Stephen writes for, along with a whole bevy of other investigative journalists who cover state government. And it's important work, and it's also the kind of work that you can support. So I suggest you do that as well. Well, no, thank you. And spotlightpa.org. Check us out. We cover everything state government related, even to our reporters' detriment.
Well, thank you, Stephen, as I hack you off the show. Thank you so much.
It's great. Thank you.
Great.
Have a good day.
Okay,
nice
you too. Bye. Bye. I feel very maternally towards Stephen because, he was a kid. And wow, he's just watching him spread his wings and become a really, really good reporter is just wonderful. Okay, so that's something, we don't pay enough attention to. And as Democrats in general, we tend to be always looking at national government. We do not pay attention to city and county and state. And we know that the closer a governmental entity is to us, actually, the more important they are to us and the more impact they have on us. So maybe a resolution for the new year would be that we pay a little more attention to what's going on in the state government. All right. In the time we have left, I want to say that it was wonderful to wake up to the news that Brittany Griner is on her way home. I frankly despaired that she would get out this quickly. And I'm just really happy. I'm not happy that the guy who's there, a guy named Whelan, and I don't know as much about that, was not released. But that's good, and that was nice to have that news. Another shocking development: apparently, more classified documents have been found in Donald Trump's possession. Oh man, unbelievable! The slow legal unraveling of this crook is going to be a really tawdry tale. But as I said, I hope it continues apace, and that he hangs in there, fighting till the end, and doing as much damage to the party he heads as he can. They deserve it. Every little bit of it. I also want to point out that, again, we don't pay a lot of attention to what's going on in other countries. And Peru elected last year I think the guy was a school teacher, and he was a lefty, and he sort of came out of nowhere, and he got elected, and then he was promising all kinds of wonderful lefty stuff, and everything just sort of went south. He wasn't producing much of anything. His approval ratings fell, blah, 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 blah. And then, stuff happened. and he was accused of corruption. And then according to the Peruvian Constitution, there was an impeachment attempt. And I'm telling this in a very, I'm not sure I'm totally correct in every way, and you probably heard about this as well and might know more than I. So knowing that the Congress was about to impeach him, he the other day said he would dissolve, the Congress. And which I guess is a kind of extra constitutional thing to do. And lo and behold, what ended up happening very quickly as he made these extra constitutional means to stay in power, the Peruvian government acted swiftly and arrested him. They arrested him for attempting to overthrow the constitutional authority of the country. And I suspect that they are absolutely correct. And his vice president has been named the new president. And so their country held, despite the fact that this president attempted through illegal machinations to stay in power. And I point it out because that could have happened here. And you could argue maybe should have happened here. What was it? And I'm sure I could answer my own question if I bothered. Were there opportunities for our government to more forcefully deal with Donald Trump's and the Republican Party's efforts to undermine our constitutional system and our election? I don't know. But here we still sit, mired in all of this, with our former president still not facing legal accounting for his treasonous and or seditious behavior. And I want to tip my hat to the Peruvians. And again, not knowing a lot of detail here, the fact that this guy was a lefty might mean I might think, would want to be on his side. But I don't care where your autocracy is coming from, left or right. I don't want to have anything to do with any of it. Speaking of that, I was watching one of the things I've been doing in my COVID-induced, quarantine, where no one comes, and I feel like I'm under house arrest in solitary, and so I've been streaming a show that I never watched, which was highly acclaimed, and it's old. For that matter, I never watched The Sopranos. I suppose I could do that next. But it's The Americans. And I'm well into season 2, and I'm enjoying it. But because it's set in a time, and this is about, KGB agents living as Americans in the United States, doing their nefarious spy work. And one of the storylines now deals with Reagan is the president, and deals with the Contras in Nicaragua. And so there's a flashback, and in it the KGB folks are actively trying to help the insurgency in Nicaragua take out their repressive, outrageously right-wing repressive government, the Somoza regime, I believe was his name, right? And the guy that I know I was rooting for, because I was on the same side as, the KGB in this case, I was rooting for these lefties in Nicaragua to take out Somoza. And the guy who was leading them was a guy named Ortega. And these, so in the show, there are those names. You hear Reagan, Ortega, Weinberger, blah, 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 blah. And I thought, isn't it interesting that watching this now, I can look back, so I know what happened. Ortega and his guys did the deed. They did it. They prevailed. And if you look at Nicaragua now, Ortega is still the revolutionary lefty. Ortega is the president, and he is as autocratic and undemocratic as the guy he overthrew. Excuse me. So, I don't. It doesn't matter to me, a human living under the boot of an autocratic government. I don't really care if they're commies or if they're fascists or some animal in between. I against them, and I would fight them, left or right. And it is so often the case that the people who are the revolutionaries who take out the bad guys, then power corrupting, become bad guys, every bit as awful, just in a slightly different way. But the people, the little guys, not much changes for them, except they still have to toe the line and keep their heads down. Oh man, sorry. I'm sorry to be sniffing and hacking in your ear. Man. Why can't I be one of those people who says, yeah, I got COVID, but just mild symptoms? I guess these are these mild symptoms. It's just that there's just endless. Anyway, okay. Just something funny that I came upon, and I It's one of those, advice columns. You sometimes wonder about people. There are more sort of cluelessly self-centered people making their way through life that clueless, don't have a clue. If they did, they wouldn't write a public letter like this woman did, showing herself to be a nightmare of a human being. And if you haven't read it, I want to have the pleasure of reading this letter to Dear Amy. You won't believe it. I know it's not what we usually do, but it's just unbelievable. Dear Amy, my fiance and I are planning our wedding. As the bride, I'm planning on making certain requests of my guests to make sure that my special day is as perfect as possible. For example, I'm asking that my guests wear exclusively yellow at the ceremony. My fiance has been supportive, but he angrily rejected my other request that our guests remain silent throughout both the ceremony and the reception to ensure that the focus remains on us. My fiance said that is irrational. He does not want to have a silent wedding. I know it's uncommon. I've never heard of anyone else having one, but we've had them in my family. And she has heard of somebody having them. The guests are not permitted to speak at all during the ceremony, and the only toasts allowed are from the mothers of the bride and groom. Instrumental music will be playing quietly. During the reception, the guests may whisper among one another, but may not speak aloud. As the newly married couple, our focus should remain solely on each other, rather than on any rowdy guests. I know it's a lot to ask, but I feel I should have the wedding I want, so that the start of our life together will be perfect. I want him to support me, even if we disagree on something. Is my fiance's lack of understanding and support a red flag? Do you believe that? I see a red flag here. Do you? Yeah, the red flag is for the poor fiance. He should turn tail and run so fast. Oh my God. What a control freak. What? Please come to my wedding, but you have to wear yellow and put tape over your mouth. What? Controlling what people will wear? What kind of a human being? Well, you can bet that Amy, went after her. Wow. My God. She ends it with this. If you don't want rowdy guests, then limit or don't serve alcohol. If you want to focus solely and exclusively on yourself, then get married in a small room, standing before a mirror. Unbelievable. Some people's incredible, and there's so many of them. There's so many, and we bump into them in the course of our lives, although this one is wowee. Unbelievable. William quickly writes, a silent wedding portends a silent marriage at best. No, I suppose the husband will be told not to speak. And this idea that she can have, it's her day, and it will be perfect. Anyone who thinks that they have that measure of control I think, is flirting with being certifiable. Jeez, I hope that poor guy gets the hell out before it's too late. Man. What else do I have here? Oh, just little things. And let me round out the rest. By the way, guys, when I speak to you next on Monday, man, I hope I'm back to my normal negative state. But I fear to hope for it. This thing is just amazing. You know, 1 minute I feel really good. I'm doing work here in the house. I'm walking the dog. I'm feeling fine. And the next minute this all yesterday, and I turned the heat up that incredibly weirdly warm day yesterday. I turned the heat up to 72 and I was still shivering, and wrapped myself in a quilt and slept the entire afternoon. And then I woke up and I felt great. And then, it's just like one thing after another. Wily little bug. Wow. So I was reading a book review of a book called Cheap Land, Colorado. And it sounds fascinating, but it's about people who choose to sort of live off the grid for various reasons. And the thing in the review that blew my mind, and it really shouldn't, if you've ever gotten on an airplane and flown over this country, was this little part, which I'll read. It's just a paragraph. If you add up all the developed areas in the 50 states of this country, all the developed areas, the cities, the suburbs, the exurbs, the little towns, the villages, the highways, the railroads, the back roads, the orchards, the vineyards, the farms, the concentrated animal feedlots, the cornfields and wheat fields and soybeans and sorghum. You add all of that up where we have taken a measure of control of the land, and it will amount to only about 1/5 of the nation, which is to say that 4/5 of this country show no human footprint of any real type. And it reminds me of those maps we see on election coverage, where they look so red, as if this is a Republican country. And it looks red because there's nobody in those red places. There's next to nobody there. 4/5 of this country is constituted by nature, by forests, by wetlands, by rangeland, by tundra, by glaciers, by mountains, by water. So the reviewer says, so if you put on a blindfold and throw a dart at a map of the country and commit to living wherever that dart lands, guys, you're most likely going to end up living alone in the middle of nowhere. And it's that, that huge expanse of the United States that holds such sprawl of our sense of self in America. This idea that has become, American individualism and freedom, that there's always go west, young man. There's always a new frontier, a place to go. And there's some truth in it, but on the other hand, it's rather apocryphal as well. But I find that number, that if you take every little teeny weeny place where humans have carved out, welcome to, Podunk, population 6. Take all those little places and the metropolitan areas and the farmlands where we are, taming nature. And it still is only 1/5 of the country. It's mind-blowing to me. So there was that. I also want to, before I go, say that there is a crisis in American journalism. And having Stephen Caruso on today, who does not work for a newspaper. He works for Spotlight PA, which you should join so that you are informed, because our local media is suffering so. Most of the writers at the Pittsburgh Post-Gazette have been on strike. See, when reporters go on strike, who knows? Because who's reporting on the strike? They can't report because they're not reporting for their... Now, the Pittsburgh strikers have they are putting out a publication, and that is something else that you should be supporting and watching for their reporting. And I wish them all the best. But they are joined today, the reporters at the Post-Gazette, by the over 1,000 reporters of the New York Times, who walked out this morning at 12:01. The first time that has happened in over 4 decades. And all of these striking journalists are doing so not because they're inclined to be political actors, but because they're being screwed by their corporate managers. And it's hard to know how to support them. But in any way that you can, you should be aware of it. I'm going to give you the name. I'm sorry, I'm having an aura. Oh, great. My vision's going. I just want to give you, God damn. To follow the PG writers, please go to unionprogress.com. Okay? And again, as I said, Spotlight PA. And all of these places need your money, your support. Another incredible journalistic organ now that is not operating as a capitalistic endeavor like our newspapers always have is Public Source. And I'm going to have someone on from Public Source next week. They are doing great journalism here, investigative journalism here in Pittsburgh, covering all the stuff that papers used to do. But they can't do it unless we support them. And publicsource.org right now does have a fundraising campaign going. I've been trying to join all of these places and support them. If it's $5 a month, if it's whatever you can give, these are the best reporters we've got. They are. These aren't like people who don't know what they're doing. These are the best. And almost none of them now work for corporate entities here in Pittsburgh. They're working at this new idea of how we can know what's going on in our hometowns, in our governments. And democracy cannot survive without that knowledge. Corporate media has screwed things up beyond belief. The New York Times is making money hand over fist. And like every other corporate enterprise in this country, it won't share the wealth. It won't pay the people who produce their product. So that's my hope, that you will reach out if you care about both democracy and true journalism, not the crapola you see from corporate media. Okay? Not that it's all crap, but we got to get smarter, and we've got to get more generous with the people who are trying to keep us informed without an agenda. So thank you all so much. And again, I hope I'm my more negative self when next you hear me. Be careful out there.
Lynn Cullen Live, Monday through Thursday from 10 a.m. to 11 a.m. and archived at pghcitypaper.com. The opinions expressed on Lynn Cullen Live are those of the host and do not necessarily reflect the viewpoints of Pittsburgh City Paper or its advertisers.